sold my body to scientists in the 50s. I want my money back. Even the tiniest details are etched deeper into my mind's side than the most fathomless ocean trenches. It's pretty much the only memory from that time I can still picture clearly when I want to. Not that I ever do. Fields of golden corn slowly danced on the Iowa summer breeze. The air was sodden with pollen and adolescent adventure, humid even by Hawkeye State standards. It was the transient time between middle school grades in which all children's worlds advance and evolve. We walked down the dirt track. Mushroom clouds of dust erupted at our scuffing feet. Simon, Jimmy, and me. Friends. For as many years as we had lived, this was another walk among many on another day like any other. Little did we know this would be the last hike we would ever take together. As it was, the funeral of our camaraderie was marked only by the passing of a damn cigarette end. This sacrifice to the gods of manhood was complemented by a stolen bottle of Templeton, one that I'd never get to drink but was still reprimanded for upon my mother's discovery of it. In my satchel. The reason our boots had found this particular stretch of dirt road loomed ahead. The closer we drew, the more I realized the baseless rumor I believed Jimmy fabricated was true. A steeple in the sea of shimmering corn husks, it imposed itself on the landscape unashamedly out of place. The protruding spike was medieval in origin, an intrusion of Gothic European architecture, at once both unfamiliar and discomforting to my brick and mortar. Knowing eyes standing at a diameter no greater than that of a lighthouse, the cylinder of cut stone and bone-colored slab stretched nearly 17 feet from the moist earth. As we closed in on our target, the assuring rays of sunlight fell behind the eclipsing presence of the alien masonry. This was when the first shiver ran down my spine. I should have listened to my instincts and turned around. Unfortunately, bravado makes even the wisest man act the fool. Jimmy walked Simon and I to a wooden door on the sun-blocked side of the silo, a soggy affair dampened by the rain. Despite us having had several drought-filled months, Jimmy stopped to check that we weren't being cowards. Both Simon and I puffed out our chest to assure him we weren't, even though I'm sure inside Simon's stomach was turning itself in knots just the same as mine. Once he was satisfied, Jimmy pushed the rickety entranceway. Ancient hinges started to creak and summer receded as our trio stared into the room on the other side. Jimmy had said it was haunted and had informed us so with the casual coolness associated with the alpha males of beta male friendship groups. This suave indifference became lost as he fell back in line with his fear-stricken comrades. I can't remember who took the first step across the threshold. There are a few details of that day that evade me, but who placed the foot that sealed our fate is one of them. The worst nightmares I've had about poor Jimmy over the years have been the ones where it was me. A shiver ran down my back, starting at the base of my skull and shuddering down my spine until it reached my legs, tensing them ready to run. Inside. The ice-cold interior was one feature and one feature only. It was a second door. This is where the similarities to the entryway we had passed through stopped. However, I wish I didn't remember the second door. The blood-red rectangle remains in the darkest corners of my psyche. There the memory waits for moments it can flash to the forefront of my thoughts. These moments are the cause of my hour-long fits of horror-filled screaming. The thing I've refused to seek help for all these years. Who would believe me anyway? The door stood free of any wall or support. Erect in the desert of off-white sand from inside the tower it beckoned towards it. The nauseating vice grip of its inhuman words on my young mind is something I wouldn't wish on even the most sadistic of men. It whispered to us not with sound but with thoughts and suggestions of pulling both physical and mental that wrapped us in its tendrils and yanked us closer. Wavering pink light from an unknown source glistened on the splintering crimson wood. The whispering doorway was coated in something so thin that I almost didn't notice. I only noticed it because of the smell. It shot straight past the lungs and settled in the deepest marrow of my bones, a sweet scent dripping with undertones of erosive antist. Of course the door had a handle, a cast iron lump that strong-armed my gaze into fixating on its cryptic design. The gut-turning pink glow shone brightly on the polished surface of the knob. Whoever had carved the doorknob must have seen hell. I can't relate to you exactly what the designs etched, scraped and sculpted onto its gleaming surface, portrayed because I honestly did not understand them. I still don't. In my darker moments, I have pored over my memories of those designs, sketched them out, even trying to find some meaning in them. A spiral of pictograms, too complex for the Homo sapien mind to comprehend, unfurled across the metal orb symbols and writing carved in inch-deep chasms, each filling me with more gut-wrenching dread than the last. I couldn't look away, though the sound of sobbing from Simon and shallow breaths from Jimmy confirmed for me that they couldn't either. The inhabitants of the underworld on the cast iron abomination had us all ensnared. They fed off of our reluctant attention, growing in their madding complexity with every trembling teenage step. The beings in the doorknob begged us to enter, promising us things I refused to remember, for their depravity genuinely disgusts me. What disturbs me most, though, is that I do remember how I nearly caved at that moment. Part of me, one of those foul promises fulfilled, even though my young mind understood almost none of them. It could have been me. Jimmy was the one who cracked, though I wish I could have stopped him. I was supposed to be his best friend after all. As much as we kept this fact a secret from Simon, it is a sad play of fate that I was as entranced by that mind-rending siren song as the trembling hand that wrapped firmly around the doorknob. The door did not creak when it was opened. It made no sound whatsoever, disturbing, not a single molecule in the atmosphere. Grains of dirty cream sand remained still as crematory mashes with one fluid non-motion. The shifting ruby surface was open. I know for a fact that it was Jimmy that took the first step this time. I know this because it was he and not myself or Simon that the demonic doorway's lamp shut on. I only caught a small glimpse of what lay on the other side. I can't tell you what I managed to see over Jimmy's shoulder. Not because I have forgotten. Bringing that memory to my mind to relay it would destroy what mental wherewithal I have left. I can't allow myself to drudge up the sounds of all those people screaming. The smell of rancid meat and abandoned gas station whenever I make the mistake of reminiscing on it makes resisting cleaning my nose out with bleach genuinely difficult. Reliving those screaming trees made of flesh, those mountain-sized organic tripods stalking the horizon, those endless plains of dark red earth that twitched and heaved underfoot would destroy me. I may be bound for an old folks' home, but that is 100 times better than an insane asylum. I also can't tell you how long Simon and I stood in horrified silence. I can't tell you because I don't know. In my mind, it felt like an eternity since Simon's hanged body was found in a tree only 5 hours after we left the safety of my house. In reality, it could not have been longer than about 15 minutes. The abominations on the handle had disappeared, the handle itself melting in front of our panicked eyes. The leering blood would have prevented us from saving Jimmy. It is to my shame that what I had seen with him made any hope of saving him impossible. Anyway, it needn't have bothered. No, I'm being harsh on myself. I was just a kid. An innocent kid, exactly like Jimmy had been. Simon started wailing as soon as the door reopened. The only saving grace was that what I had seen on the other side was now gone. All it had left in its wake was a barren wasteland, a decaying plateau of rotting charcoal appendages and mountainous three-legged corpses on the horizon. Compared to what had occupied the space 1/4 of an hour ago, the thousands of human bodies did not face me by this point. My battered psyche did not flinch at the sight of the decaying figures piled in a great pyramid. In the distance, this monument to stagnation and cosmic futility stood taller than the largest of the now dead tripods. Even from this distance, I could see the throne at its peak. Its occupant was thankfully masked by clouds and the limitations of my eyesight. I don't think I would still be here today if I'd seen them up close. The tortured stumbling of the old man through the doorway saved me from having to look at that figure atop their corpse for a long the moment his gnarled feet crossed the threshold. The door sealed itself. The blood would erupted into a green flame. The pink light died, leaving Simon and I alone in the shadowy cylinder with a man from the world beyond. I remember that he was unspeakably light as we dragged him to the warmth of the Iowan summer outside the tower. We gave him some of the Templeton. We didn't know what else to do. His chart form was haunting. He was thinner than any man should be able to be. Outlines of shrink-wrapped organs protruded from his abdomen with nauseating clarity. He slurped the foul liquid through lipless teeth, the stolen bottle clasped in long whip claws. His translucent skin of impossible age was scarred with a patchwork of symbols, unholy brands reminiscent of the edgings in the doorknob. The seared lines in sagging flesh contorted and writhed. As I watched, they moved and shifted across the decaying man's schoolish limbs. Scriptures written in otherworldly tongues that inspired only lunacy in the eyes of mortal beholders. A small part of me wishes that I could describe them to you in detail. I hate that this part of me exists. I used to draw them whilst I slept, you know. It's why my folks said I couldn't keep a diary when I was a teenager. I showed one of the therapists once. She disappeared about a week later. I'm glad they burned the drawings. Long matted hair covered the old man's gnarled features. This is why I didn't realize the slavering wretch from the terror beyond the threshold was Jimmy until it looked me directly in the eyes. Sometimes I try to guess how long he must have been there. Not often, though. I don't like to ponder on the torture. That immeasurable time frame was filled with. The terror in the eyes I clearly recognized as Jimmy's was enough to let me know my mind could not withstand such things. I can still remember his rotting lipless gums, the smell of decomposing flesh on the noxious breath that funneled down his yellow tongue. The creature that was once Jimmy stood to whisper one last piece of advice before sprinting off into the cornfield. It has never re-emerged. The papers and police incorrectly hypothesized that Simon had killed Jimmy and hidden his remains. Simon's reasoning for killing himself was attributed to guilt. As the sole survivor, I was apprehended, and when this tale was retold, labeled as traumatized. I'm not proud of the fact that I never corrected them. Let's be honest, if I'd pushed the matter, traumatized could have quickly turned into schizophrenic, and from their guilty was only a few steps away. I may have had my world ended, but I didn't want to do all the crying and trying to piece together what happened in prison. Besides, it'll surprise none of you to know that I went looking for the tower and for Jimmy several times over the years. Suffice to say, I found neither again. So I went about my life. Now I'm here, decades later, retelling the only story I've never told, hoping a bunch of strangers on the web will listen. I'm hoping doing this will bring me some kind of end to the nightmares. If I've only got a decade or two left in me, I'd like to be able to get at least one decent night's sleep before I go. The thing that keeps me up The thing that makes me wake up half an hour after falling asleep every night like clockwork, is what Jimmy whispered to me before he disappeared into the corn. I've been where you'll go when you die, and the man in charge is angry with us.